The alarm clock blared at 5:15 in the morning, but Maya Chen had been staring at the ceiling for nearly an hour already. Her body operated on a precision timer honed through years of missions that required the kind of patience most people couldn't comprehend. Sleep was a luxury she'd learned to portion out in tactical increments. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her studio apartment in Fort Benning, Georgia was sparse but meticulously organized. No photos adorned the walls, no mementos cluttered the surfaces. Everything had its place: weapons cleaning kit in the top drawer, 3 identical black t-shirts folded with military precision, running shoes aligned perfectly by the door. The space resembled a hotel room rather than a home designed for function. Rather than comfort, Maya's morning routine never varied. 50 push-ups, though her slender arms and small hands made many assume she struggled with physical training. A 5-mile run while the base still slept. A shower exactly 4 minutes long, black coffee with nothing added. Her movements were economical, wasting no energy, betraying nothing of what lay beneath the surface. By 6:30, she was walking across the training grounds toward the Sniper Division's headquarters. At 5'4" with a delicate build, Maya didn't match the typical image of an elite military sniper. Her gear bag looked almost comically large against her frame. New recruits often mistook her for administrative staff rather than the most precise shot in the entire division. "Morning, Mouse," called Sergeant Jackson, using the nickname that had followed her since basic training. It had started as an insult, a reference to both her size and her quiet nature. Now it held a strange mixture of affection and lingering condescension. "Morning, Sarge," she replied, her voice soft but clear. Maya never raised her voice. She'd learned long ago that people pay closer attention to quiet words than shouted ones. The firing range wouldn't open for another hour, but Maya always arrived early to prepare her equipment with the same focused precision she applied to everything else. Her custom rifle received attention first, each component checked, cleaned, and verified. The ritual was as much psychological as practical. In her world, overlooking the smallest detail could cost lives. "You're like a surgeon with that thing," commented Lieutenant Rivera, who had recently transferred to the division. He watched as her small hands moved with surprising dexterity across the weapon parts. "Just being thorough, sir," Maya answered, without looking up. "I heard some things about you," Rivera continued, leaning against the doorframe. "They say you've got the highest accuracy scores in the division, but the weakest grip strength. How does that work exactly?" Maya had heard variations of this question throughout her career. The contradiction fascinated people. How someone with hands so small they needed custom-modified equipment could consistently outshoot men twice her size. "It's not about strength," she said simply. "It's about control." What she didn't explain was the thousands of hours of practice, the specially designed techniques she'd developed to compensate for what her body lacked in raw power. She didn't mention the specialized grip she'd engineered herself after military-issue equipment had failed her. She definitely didn't talk about the missions where those adaptations had made the difference between success and failure. The firing range filled as the morning progressed. Maya took her position at the far end, away from the casual conversations and competitive banter. The newest batch of sniper trainees arrived for their qualification session, their instructor, Master Sergeant Briggs, leading them with his usual booming voice. "Eyes up, people. Today you'll see what real precision looks like," Briggs announced. "Specialist Chen will demonstrate the standards you're aiming for. Don't get discouraged when you fall short." Maya felt the trainee's eyes on her as she stepped up to the firing line. She recognized the expressions: skepticism, amusement, dismissal. Her custom rifle looked almost too large for her frame, and when she extended her arms, Her sleeves rode up to reveal wrists so narrow that one of the trainees actually snickered. "Something funny, Peterson?" Briggs snapped. "No, sir," the trainee responded, but his expression said otherwise. Maya ignored them all, settling into the familiar space of absolute focus that had defined her professional life. The world narrowed to her breath, her heartbeat, the feel of the weapon against her shoulder. When she fired, the shots came in, a rhythm as steady as a metronome. After she finished, Briggs called the trainees forward to examine the targets. Perfect grouping, center mass, consistent across all distances. The snickering stopped. "That, gentlemen, is why Specialist Chen is heading to the Advanced Tactical Response course next month instead of you," Briggs said. "Questions?" Peterson raised his hand. "With respect, sir, how does she handle recoil with those wrists? I mean, in a real combat situation." "In a real combat situation, Peterson, while you're still adjusting your grip, Chen would have already completed the mission," Briggs cut him off. "Now shut up and try to learn something. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." What none of them knew, what Maya's personnel file didn't reveal, was that she had already been in more real combat situations than most of them would see in their entire careers. Her official record showed only standard deployments and training exercises. The rest was buried under classification levels that most of her colleagues didn't know existed. Later that day, Captain Harlow, the division commander, called Maya into his office. A stocky man with 20 years of service etched into his weathered face. Harlow had always treated Maya with professional respect, if not warmth. "Specialist Chen, have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I've received your transfer request for the Arctic Warfare Training Program." Maya sat with perfect posture, hands resting lightly on her knees. "Yes, sir." "I'm denying it," Harlow said flatly, sliding her paperwork back across the desk. Maya's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "May I ask why, sir?" "Because you'd wash out in the first week," Harlow replied. "The physical demands alone. My qualification scores exceed the requirements by 23%. Maya interrupted, an unusual breach of protocol for her. "And my last physical evaluation. Numbers on paper don't tell the whole story, Chen," Harlow said. "The Arctic program involves carrying heavy equipment through extreme conditions. With your build and your documented grip strength issues, you're setting yourself up for failure. I'm doing you a favor." Maya knew better than to argue further. She'd encountered this wall before, commanders who couldn't see past her physical stature, who made assumptions based on how she looked rather than what she could do. Instead, she asked, "Is there an alternative assignment you'd recommend, sir?" Harlow shuffled through some papers on his desk. "The training division needs instructors. Your precision is unquestionable, and you could do some good teaching the basics to new recruits." Teaching the basics. Being sidelined to the classroom while others with half her skill were deployed to the field. Maya felt the familiar burn of frustration, but kept her face carefully neutral. "I'll consider it, sir. Thank you for your time." She stood to leave. "Shun," Harlow called as she reached the door. "It's not personal. Some people just aren't built for certain assignments. You found your niche here. Be satisfied with that." Maya nodded once and left, her stride betraying none of the emotions churning beneath her composed exterior. Back in her apartment that evening, she allowed herself precisely 10 minutes of controlled anger, doing push-ups until her arms shook with exhaustion. Then she showered, reordered her equipment, and prepared for the next day as if nothing had happened. What Captain Harlow and the others didn't know was that Maya Chen wasn't just a skilled shooter with a small frame and weak grip. She was a ghost within the military system, her most significant contributions hidden behind security clearances that her direct superiors couldn't access. The woman they saw as physically limited had completed operations that officially never happened, in conditions that would break most of the men who underestimated her. 3 years earlier, during a classified operation in Eastern Europe, Maya had remained motionless in a sniper hide for 72 hours straight, in temperatures that dropped to 15 below zero. While other team members had rotated shifts, Maya had stayed in position, her modified rifle an extension of her body, waiting for a single moment that might never come. When it did, her shot had traveled 1,472 meters, through shifting winds to eliminate a target that 3 other snipers had missed. The operation was scrubbed from official records, the victory attributed to coalition forces in the briefest of mission reports. 6 months before that, in a desert halfway across the world, she'd crawled 3 miles through terrain littered with improvised explosives, her slight frame an advantage where larger soldiers would have triggered sensors. The intelligence she gathered had saved 2 platoons from an ambush. Her commander had recommended her for a commendation that was immediately classified and buried. Maya's military ID identified her as a specialist with standard sniper training. Her true designation existed only in files accessible to a handful of high-ranking officials with specific clearance. To them, she was Whisper, an asset deployed when standard approaches failed, when impossible shots needed to be made, when absolute precision under extreme conditions was the only option. The next morning, Maya's phone vibrated at 4:30 a.m., an hour before her usual wake-up. The text message contained only a string of numbers, coordinates followed by a time code. She was dressed and packed within 10 minutes, her go bag always ready for exactly this scenario. As she left her apartment, she sent a pre-written email to Captain Harlow explaining a family emergency that would require a few days' leave. By sunrise, she was in a helicopter heading toward the mountains of Tennessee, where a situation had developed that required her specific skills. The briefing came from Colonel Westfield, a stern-faced woman who had personally recruited Maya for the Shadow program 5 years earlier. Domestic terrorist cell, Westfield explained over the roar of the helicopter. They've taken hostages. At a research facility, 16 civilians, mostly scientists. Local police engaged at 0200 hours but were repelled. SWAT arrived at 0330 and established a perimeter, but the situation is deteriorating. Maya absorbed the information silently, her mind already calculating angles, elevations, potential complications. The main issue, Westfield continued, is their position. They're holding the hostages in the main laboratory, which is situated behind reinforced glass designed to contain potential chemical hazards. The glass is rated to withstand small arms fire, and they've barricaded all entry points. Any frontal assault would result in casualties. What's the objective? Maya asked, her voice barely audible above the helicopter noise. Primary target is this man. Westfield handed her a tablet showing a grainy image. Victor Costa, former military, dishonorably discharged 3 years ago. He's the leader and the most immediate threat. Intelligence suggests he's wearing explosives and has threatened to detonate if demands aren't met. Maya studied the image, committing every detail to memory. Demands? The usual manifesto of grievances, plus release of 3 imprisoned associates. The government's official position is no negotiation, but they've been stalling to buy time. Westfield's expression grew even more serious. We have reason to believe they're planning to release a biochemical agent developed at the facility. The deadline is noon. Maya checked her watch. Just over 6 hours. The only potential angle is through a ventilation shaft on the north side of the building, Westfield continued. It's approximately 18 inches in diameter, too small for standard operators. There's a partial line of sight to the main lab, but it would require a shot through a reflection off a curved surface, with multiple environmental factors in play. Maya understood now why she had been called. Not despite her small frame, but Because of it. Not despite her specialized techniques, but because of them. The shot being described was theoretically impossible, firing at a target visible only as a reflection, requiring calculations of angle and refraction that went beyond standard sniper training. The shaft has been compromised in previous attempts. To insert surveillance, Westfield concluded. We believe it's now being monitored. Any movement detected will likely trigger immediate execution of hostages. I'll need environmental data, Maya said, already mentally reviewing the custom ammunition she carried for situations involving reflective surfaces, and the exact composition of the glass. Everything we have is here. Westfield handed her another tablet. You'll be inserted 2 miles from the facility and make your approach on foot to avoid detection. Support team will maintain communication, but will not approach unless the situation changes dramatically. As the helicopter began its descent into a clearing, Westfield added, the regular military units on site haven't been briefed on your arrival or capabilities. As far as they're concerned, you're just a specialist consultant. Keep it that way. Maya nodded. She was used to operating in shadows, accustomed to being underestimated, familiar with achieving the impossible without recognition. It was the price of being who she was, a weapon so specialized that most people couldn't comprehend its purpose. The helicopter touched down, and Maya stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness, her equipment bag slung over her shoulder. As the rotor wash faded, she heard Westfield's final words. This one's different, whisper. We've got a congressman's daughter among the hostages, and the potential for a chemical release that could affect 3 counties. Don't miss. Maya didn't bother responding. In her entire career, through conditions that would break most operators, she had never missed. The approach to the facility took Maya through dense forest and across a shallow stream, her movements silent and methodical. The first light of dawn was just breaking when she reached the outer perimeter established by law enforcement. She observed from cover, noting the positions of SWAT team members, the command post setup, the nervous energy that permeated the scene. After 10 minutes of observation, she activated her secure communication device. On site, she whispered. Need escort through law enforcement perimeter. 5 minutes later, a stern-faced FBI agent appeared at the coordinates Maya had provided. Agent Diaz, according to her identification, looked momentarily startled at Maya's appearance but recovered quickly. I was told to expect a military specialist, Diaz said, her tone making it clear she had anticipated someone quite different. That's me, Maya replied simply. I need to see the command center and all current intel. Diaz led her through the perimeter, past curious glances from police officers and tactical team members. The command center had been established in a mobile unit approximately half a mile from the facility. Inside, the tension was palpable, with multiple agencies represented, and the clock ticking steadily toward the noon deadline. Commander Reynolds, the on-site tactical leader, was in the middle of a heated discussion when Maya entered. He broke off mid-sentence, his expression cycling through confusion, annoyance, and disbelief as Diaz made introductions. This is the specialist the Pentagon sent? Reynolds asked, making no attempt to hide his skepticism. For a hostage situation with armed terrorists? I need to see the structural plans for the ventilation system on the north side, Maya said, ignoring his tone. And any thermal imaging you've managed to capture of the main laboratory. Reynolds exchanged glances with his team before reluctantly gesturing to a computer station. Everything we have is there. But I should warn you, we've already explored and dismissed the ventilation angle. It's too narrow for deployment, and they've rigged motion sensors after our last attempt to insert surveillance. Maya sat down at the station and began reviewing the information, her focus absolute. The ventilation shaft was indeed narrow, barely 18 inches at its widest point, and it curved in a way that would make navigation challenging for someone even of her size. But it offered something invaluable, a potential angle on the main laboratory that no one else had considered viable. As she studied the thermal imaging, she could make out 10 heat signatures in the main lab, likely some of the hostages and terrorists. The rest would be in adjacent rooms. The leader, Costa, appeared to be pacing near the center of the room, occasionally gesturing toward what must be the hostages seated along one wall. The glass composition? She asked without looking up. One of the technical specialists answered, triple-layered polycarbonate with a specialized coating designed to contain chemical agents. It's rated to withstand up to. I need exact specifications, not generalities, Maya interrupted. Refractive index, thickness of each layer, coating composition. The specialist looked taken aback, but began pulling up the technical documentation. Maya absorbed the information methodically, her mind already calculating trajectories, angles of incidence and reflection, the minute adjustments that would be necessary. This is all very interesting, Reynolds said impatiently. But we have less than 5 hours before these terrorists potentially release a biochemical agent or execute hostages. What exactly is your plan? Maya finally looked up from the computer. I'm going to enter the ventilation shaft and take a shot that will eliminate the primary threat. The room fell silent for a moment before several people began speaking at once. That's impossible. The angles don't work. Any movement in that shaft will trigger. Reynolds held up a hand for silence. Specialist. Chen, was it? I appreciate your confidence, but even if you could somehow navigate that shaft without triggering their sensors, the shot you're describing is physically impossible. The only angle to the lab requires firing at a reflection on a curved surface, through specialized glass, at a moving target. No one can make that shot. Maya met his gaze steadily. I can. Based on what? Your extensive combat experience? Reynolds's voice dripped with sarcasm. I've got men out there with 20 years in the field who wouldn't attempt what you're suggesting. Then they're wise to know their limitations, Maya replied, her voice still quiet, but carrying an unmistakable certainty. I know mine as well. This shot is within them. Before Reynolds could respond, his communication device buzzed. After a brief conversation, his expression darkened. They've executed one hostage. They're threatening another in 30 minutes if their demands aren't met. He looked around the room. Options, people. I need viable options now. The tactical team began outlining assault scenarios, each one grimmer than the last. Estimated casualty rates ranged from 40 to 70% of the hostages, with additional losses among the assault team. The chemical release remained a wild card that could multiply the death toll exponentially. Throughout the discussion, Maya remained silent, continuing her calculations and preparations. When there was a momentary lull, she spoke again. The ventilation shaft approach remains the only option with potential for 0 hostage casualties. Reynolds looked at her with a mixture of frustration and desperation. And you're absolutely certain you can make this shot? Because if you miss, or if they detect your presence before you're in position, we're looking at immediate execution of all remaining hostages. I don't miss, Maya said simply. Something in her tone must have finally reached Reynolds. He studied her for a long moment, then turned to Agent Diaz. Who exactly authorized this specialist? Diaz handed him a sealed document. Reynolds read it, his expression shifting from skepticism to surprise. He looked at Maya with new eyes. You have 30 minutes to prepare, he said finally. If you're not in position by the time they threaten the next hostage, we're going with the assault. Plan. As Maya gathered her equipment, she could hear the whispers behind her. Is she really going to try that shot? With those arms? She can barely carry her own gear. This is insane. We're trusting lives to someone who looks like she belongs in high school. Maya had heard it all before, in different contexts. Different missions, different lives. The underestimation had become so familiar it was almost comforting. A constant she could rely on while everything else changed. Outside the command center, She methodically prepared her specialized rifle, making minute adjustments based on the environmental data and structural specifications she'd reviewed. Each movement was precise, each calculation exact. This was where Maya Chen disappeared entirely, and Whisper, the ghost that haunted impossible missions, took her place. A shadow fell across her work. She looked up to see a muscular SWAT team member watching her preparations with undisguised skepticism. "They're saying you're going to attempt a reflection shot through the ventilation system," he said. "That's a 1 in a million shot on a good day." Maya continued her preparations without responding. "I've been on the sniper team for 8 years," he continued, "and I wouldn't attempt that shot with a gun to my head. What makes you think you can make it?" Maya finally paused, looking up at him. "Because I've made harder shots under worse conditions." The man laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Right, with those wrists? I've seen your type before. Technical specialists who think simulator training translates to the field. This isn't a video game. People will die if you miss." Maya returned to her work, making a final adjustment to her scope. "People will die if I don't try." The man watched her a moment longer, then shook his head and walked away, muttering something about desperate measures and Hail Mary passes. 20 minutes later, Maya was at the entry point for the ventilation shaft, her specialized rifle secured against her body, a communication device in her ear. The shaft opening had been carefully exposed by the tactical team, revealing a dark, narrow passage that curved away into the building's infrastructure. "Motion sensors begin approximately 15 meters in," the technical specialist informed her through the earpiece. "Any movement above their threshold will trigger an alarm in the main laboratory." Maya nodded, though no one could see her. She removed her outer tactical gear, reducing her profile to the absolute minimum. Then she began the slow, methodical process of entering the shaft, her movements so controlled they barely registered as motion at all. The journey through the ventilation system was a masterclass in patience and physical control. Where others would have created vibrations, Maya glided like a ghost. Where others would have rushed, she moved with glacial deliberation, each centimeter forward the result of calculated precision. After 20 minutes, she reached the critical junction, a curved section of ductwork that offered a partial view of the main laboratory through a ventilation grate. From her position, she could see only reflections on the curved metal surface of an air circulation unit, distorted images of the room beyond. Through these reflections, she could make out fragments of the hostage situation, figures seated against one wall, a man pacing with what appeared to be an assault rifle, the faint outline of what must be explosive devices strapped to his chest. Maya began the painstaking process of setting up her shot, using the reflective surface as both her viewing medium and her targeting system. The calculations involved were staggering, adjusting for the curvature of the reflective surface, the refraction of the triple-layered glass, the environmental factors within the shaft, and the minute movements of her target. "Status update," came Reynolds's tense voice through her earpiece. "In position," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "Acquiring target. Be advised, they're preparing to execute another hostage in approximately 3 minutes. Female. Scientist, late 30s. Maya continued her preparations, her breathing slowing to a rhythm that seemed barely human. Her heart rate dropped to a level that would concern medical professionals, a technique she had perfected to eliminate even the slightest tremor from pulse movement. Through her specialized scope, she could now see the fractured reflection of Victor Costa as he gestured angrily toward a woman being forced to her knees. The angle was impossible, the shot unthinkable, firing at a reflection of a moving target, through specialized glass with multiple environmental factors in play. For anyone else, it would have been suicide to attempt. For Maya, it was Tuesday. 2 minutes, came Reynolds's voice, tension making it almost unrecognizable. Maya made a final microscopic adjustment to her aim, compensating for a slight change in air pressure within the ventilation system. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, her body so still she might have been part of the building's infrastructure. 1 minute, assault team, prepare for emergency deployment. Maya tuned out the voices, the countdown, the world beyond her scope. Everything narrowed to the fractured reflection of Victor Costa, the physics of the impossible shot, the perfect stillness required to deliver it. 30 seconds. In the reflection, she could see Costa raising his weapon toward the kneeling woman. The other terrorists were positioned around the room, their attention focused on the impending execution. 20 seconds. Maya, we need confirmation you have the shot. She didn't respond. Couldn't respond. The slightest movement, even to speak, would disrupt the delicate balance she had achieved. 10 seconds. Assault team, stand by for go order. In the reflection, Costa stepped forward, pressing his weapon against the hostage's head. 5 seconds. Maya exhaled half a breath and held the remainder. 4. Her finger applied 2 pounds of pressure to a 4.5-pound trigger. 3. The variables locked into place like tumblers in an impossibly complex lock. 2. Maya Chen disappeared entirely, and Whisper took the shot. 1. The sound was barely a whisper. The specialized subsonic round designed for maximum accuracy at the cost of audible signature. Through her scope, Maya watched the reflection as Victor Costa's head snapped back, a small, precise hole appearing exactly between his eyes. His finger never had the chance to tighten on his trigger. Target down, she murmured into her communication. Device already beginning the process of extracting herself from the ventilation shaft. Explosives intact. Hostage safe. The chaos that erupted over the communications channel told its own story. Disbelief, confusion, then the scramble to capitalize on the sudden opportunity. The assault team moved in to secure the remaining terrorists who were still trying to process how their leader had been eliminated in a room that should have been impenetrable. By the time Maya emerged from the ventilation shaft, the situation had been resolved. All hostages rescued. All terrorists either dead or in custody. The biochemical threat contained without a single release. She packed her specialized rifle with the same methodical precision she applied to everything, ignoring the stares from tactical team members who had been told about the shot but couldn't quite believe it. Commander Reynolds approached as she was finishing, his earlier skepticism replaced by a complex mixture of respect and discomfort. That shot, he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. The technical team says it shouldn't have been possible. The angles, the reflection, the glass composition. They're saying it was beyond the capabilities of any known sniper system. Maya secured the last component of her equipment. They're not wrong. Then how? Reynolds gestured vaguely toward the facility. It's not about strength, Maya sighed, echoing her earlier explanation to Lieutenant Rivera, though Reynolds wouldn't know that. It's about control. Before Reynolds could respond, a black SUV pulled up and Colonel Westfield emerged. She nodded to Maya, then turned to Reynolds. Commander, I'll need your team to sign additional non-disclosure agreements regarding today's operation. Specialist. Chen's involvement is classified at a level beyond your current authorization. Reynolds looked between Westfield and Maya, understanding dawning in his eyes. She's not just a specialist, is she? Specialist Chen is a valuable asset who has completed her assignment, Westfield replied flatly. That's all you need to know. As Maya walked toward the SUV, she passed the SWAT sniper who had mocked her earlier. He stood frozen, his expression a study in disbelief. 1 in a million shot, right? She said quietly as she passed him. The man's mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. He looked down at her small hands, her slender wrists, trying to reconcile what he had believed with what he now knew. Maya didn't wait for his response. She had already moved on to mentally preparing for her return to base, where she would resume Her role as the underestimated specialist with the weak grip and the perfect aim, where the jokes and the skepticism would continue because no one would know what had happened today. And that was exactly how she preferred it. 2 days after the hostage rescue, Maya Chen was back at Fort Benning, reassembled into her cover identity as if the Tennessee operation had never happened. She arrived at the firing range at her usual time, set up her equipment with her usual precision, and proceeded through training exercises as if she hadn't just made what some classified reports were calling the shot of the century. No one on base knew, no one would ever know. That was the nature of her existence. Extraordinary accomplishments buried under ordinary routines. Remarkable skills hidden behind an unremarkable appearance. "Chun, office now." Captain Harlow's voice cut across the firing range, drawing curious glances from other personnel. Maya secured her weapon and followed him, maintaining her customary silence. Inside his office, Harlow looked agitated, shuffling through paperwork with unusual intensity. "Your leave request was approved retroactively," he said without looking up. "Family emergency resolved, I assume?" "Yes, sir," Maya responded, standing at parade rest, her face betraying nothing. "Good, because we have a situation." Harlow finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "The Arctic Warfare Program called. They've requested you specifically for their next training cycle." Maya kept her expression neutral despite the surprise. The same program Harlow had deemed physically impossible for her just days ago was now requesting her by name. "I don't understand it," Harlow continued, genuine confusion in his voice. "I warned them about your physical limitations. Told them you wouldn't last a week in those conditions. But they insisted." He pushed a form across his desk. "Orders came from way above my pay grade. You leave next week." Maya scanned the document, noting the signature at the bottom, Colonel Westfield. The shadow program was moving her again. Repositioning their asset under the guise of standard military transfers. "Is this what you want, Chun?" Harlow asked, a hint of genuine concern breaking through his usual gruffness. "Those conditions are brutal even for operators with twice your strength. I'm not trying to hold you back. I'm trying to prevent you from washing out and damaging your career." For the first time, Maya recognized that Harlow's opposition might contain a grain of actual concern rather than pure dismissal. It didn't change the fundamental misunderstanding, but it shifted the context slightly. "I can handle it, sir," she said simply. Harlow sighed. "Well, it's out of my hands now. Report to medical for your pre-deployment physical, then get your cold weather gear issued. And Chun?" He paused, looking uncomfortable. "Prove me wrong." As Maya left the office, she passed Sergeant Jackson in the hallway. He glanced at the papers in her hand, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Arctic program?" he asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "How'd you swing that mouse?" "Just lucky, I guess," Maya replied, continuing past him. "Luck's got nothing to do with it," Jackson called after her. "Those slots are competitive as hell. Someone up there must think you've got something special. If only he knew." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Maya underwent the standard medical evaluations, equipment fittings, and briefings required for the Arctic program. Throughout it all, she noted the looks, the skepticism, the confusion, the occasional outright derision when personnel thought she couldn't see. "There's been a mistake," she overheard one equipment officer telling another as they prepared her cold weather gear. "No way she passed the physical requirements for this program." "Must be a diversity initiative," the other replied with smirk. "Going to be fun watching her try to carry a full Arctic load with those arms." Maya accepted her equipment without comment, packed it with perfect efficiency, and continued her preparations. The opinions of others had ceased to matter to her long ago. Results were the only currency she traded in, and her results spoke in a language few were cleared to understand. The night before her departure, Maya performed her usual equipment check, examining each piece of gear with methodical precision. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unlisted number. Package delivered to your quarters. In her room, she found a nondescript black case containing specialized modifications for her cold weather equipment, adjustments designed specifically for her frame and operational requirements. Attached was a simple note with Colonel Westfield's initials. No words, just a set of coordinates that Maya immediately memorized before burning the paper. She understood the message clearly. The Arctic program was not just a training assignment, it was a mission. Something was happening at those coordinates, something that required her unique skills. The following morning, Maya boarded a military transport plane along with 11 other specialists selected for the Arctic program. All were men, all physically imposing, all carrying the confident demeanor of operators who had never been underestimated in their lives. They eyed her with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism as she took her seat. "First time in the Arctic?" asked the man beside her, a mountain of muscle named Ramirez according to his tag. "Yes," Maya answered simply. "Word of advice, the cold up there isn't like anything you've experienced. It doesn't just chill you, it hunts you. Finds every weakness. Exploits every vulnerability." He glanced at her slender frame. "No offense, but you might want to reconsider this assignment." Maya met his gaze steadily. "I'll keep that in mind." As the plane lifted off, she closed her eyes, mentally reviewing what she knew about the coordinates Westfield had provided. They pointed to a location in the northernmost reaches of Alaska, near a research station that officially monitored climate patterns, but had recently shown unusual activity patterns according to satellite imagery. Beyond that, she would have to wait for her full briefing. The Arctic Training Center was a marvel of military engineering, a complex of reinforced structures designed to withstand the most extreme conditions on Earth. Temperatures regularly dropped to 40 below zero, winds exceeded hurricane force, and daylight was a brief formality during winter months. Upon arrival, the group was immediately subjected to a punishing series of tests designed to acclimate them to the conditions and identify any who might not be suited for the program. The first was a 5-mile march in full Arctic gear, nearly 80 pounds of equipment that had to be carried through knee-deep snow against biting winds. "Chun's not going to make the first checkpoint," one of the men muttered as they geared up. $10 says she calls for extraction before mile 2, another responded. Maya ignored them, focusing instead on adjusting her specialized equipment. The modifications Westfield had provided distributed the weight differently, utilizing physics rather than raw strength to manage the load. It wasn't easier. Nothing about operating in these conditions could be easy, but it was possible in a way standard equipment would not have been for someone of her build. The march began under the watchful eyes of the program instructors, led by Major Blackwood, a veteran of multiple Arctic deployments with a reputation for uncompromising standards. His eyes lingered on Maya as he gave final instructions, his expression making it clear he shared the general skepticism about her capabilities. The first mile was brutal, the cold immediately attacking exposed skin with vicious intensity. 2 of the men began showing signs of struggle, their breathing labored, their pace slowing. Maya maintained a steady rhythm, her movements economical, her focus absolute. She had learned long ago that endurance wasn't about size or even strength. It was about efficiency and will. By mile 3, 3 participants had fallen back significantly, while Maya continued her steady pace. She wasn't at the front of the group. The 2 leaders were former Force Recon Marines with significant cold weather experience, but she was solidly in the middle pack, showing none of the strain that several larger men were displaying. "How the hell is she still moving?" she heard one of the struggling specialists gasp to another as she passed them. "No idea," came the winded reply. "Thought for sure she'd have dropped by now." Major Blackwood, monitoring the march from a specialized vehicle, watched with increasing interest as Maya maintained her position through mile 4 and into the final stretch. When she crossed the finish line 5th out of 12, he made a note in his tablet without comment. That evening, in the training center's mess hall, the dynamics had shifted subtly. The outright dismissal had been replaced by confused reassessment. Maya ate alone as usual, but noticed the occasional glances now carried a different quality. Less derision, more curiosity. Ramirez, who had finished just ahead of her, sat down across the table uninvited. "That was impressive today," he said. Without preamble. Most first-timers struggle a lot more with the cold and weight. Maya nodded acknowledgement but offered no explanation. "Seriously, what's your secret?" he pressed. "You're half the size of most of us, but you outlasted guys with years of experience." "Efficiency," Maya said after a moment. "Most people waste energy fighting conditions instead of adapting to them." Before Ramirez could respond, Major Blackwood appeared at their table. "Chun, my office 10 minutes." The Major's office was spartanly furnished, with maps of the Arctic region covering one wall and equipment specifications on another. He gestured for Maya to sit, studying her with open curiosity. "Your file is interesting reading, specialist," he said finally. "Exceptional marksmanship scores, middling physical evaluations, and a recommendation from your previous commander that specifically advised against your inclusion in this program." He leaned forward. "Yet here you are, outperforming experienced operators on your first day." Maya remained silent, waiting for the actual question. "I've been running this program for 6 years," Blackwood continued. "I've seen every type of operator come through. The physical specimens who couldn't handle the psychological pressure, the tough-minded who lacked the technical skills, the technically proficient who buckled under physical demands. But you're something else entirely." He pulled up a file on his computer, turning the screen so Maya could see footage of her during the march. "You maintain the exact same rhythm, regardless of terrain changes. Your breathing pattern never alters. Your equipment adjustments are unlike anything in our standard issue." He paused. "Who are you really, Specialist Chun?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "Just someone trying to complete the training, sir." Blackwood studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if reaching a decision. "Tomorrow's exercise involves precision shooting in extreme weather conditions. Temperatures will be around 30 below with wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Standard success rate for first-time participants is approximately 40%. "I understand, sir. I've received orders to pull you from that exercise for specialized training." Blackwood continued, watching her reaction carefully. "Orders that came through channels I wasn't aware existed until today." Maya's expression didn't change, but her mind immediately connected this development to the coordinates Westfield had provided. "Report to Hangar C at 0500 tomorrow instead of the main training area," Blackwood said. "Apparently, someone thinks your skills are needed elsewhere." He hesitated, then added, "Whatever you're really doing here, Chun, be careful. The Arctic doesn't forgive mistakes." At precisely 0500 the next morning, Maya arrived at Hangar C, a nondescript structure set apart from the main training facilities. Inside, she found Colonel Westfield waiting alongside equipment she recognized as designed for long-range surveillance and precision operations. "Specialist Chen," Westfield greeted her formally, aware of potential monitoring. "Thank you for joining us for this specialized training module." Maya nodded, understanding the pretense. "Happy to be selected, ma'am." Once they were inside a secured area of the hangar, Westfield's demeanor changed. "We have a situation," she said without preamble, bringing up satellite imagery on a specialized display. "Russian research vessel, officially conducting climate studies in international waters. In reality, we believe they're deploying underwater surveillance equipment aimed at tracking our submarine movements." Maya studied the images, noting the vessel's position relative to known patrol routes. Standard protocols would involve diplomatic channels, perhaps some saber-rattling with our own naval assets, Westfield continued. But there's a complication. She enlarged a section of the image, showing a distinctive piece of equipment on the vessel's deck. That's an experimental acoustic system capable of detecting submarine signatures at 3 times the normal range. If they succeed in deploying it, our entire northern deterrent strategy is compromised. The coordinates you sent, Maya said, making the connection. They're at the convergence point of 3 of our submarine transit lanes. Westfield nodded, unsurprised that Maya had already analyzed the location. Exactly. We need that system disabled before it becomes operational. Conventional options all carry unacceptable diplomatic risks. We need Whisper. The mission parameters took shape quickly. The Russian vessel was currently positioned 7 miles offshore from an uninhabited stretch of Alaskan coastline. The experimental acoustic system required final calibration before deployment, a process that would take place on deck due to technical requirements. The lead scientist would perform this calibration personally due to its classified nature. 1 shot, Westfield explained, displaying the profile of a man identified as Dr. Mikhail Kharkov. The system itself is too well protected for a direct strike, but it requires human operation for final deployment. Remove Dr. Kharkov, and the mission is delayed by months, forcing them to return to port without accomplishing their objective. Weather conditions? Maya asked, already calculating trajectories. That's the real challenge, Westfield replied. Arctic storm moving in. Temperatures dropping to 50 below with wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. Visibility will be severely limited. The shot will need to be taken during the predicted 20-minute window when the calibration must occur, regardless of weather conditions. Maya absorbed the information methodically. Distance? Approximately 1,850 meters from the only viable position, with line of sight to the vessel. The shot will need to account for extreme wind variation, temperature effects on ballistics, and potential light refraction from ice crystals in the air. Most snipers would have immediately declared the shot impossible. Maya simply asked, when? Tonight. The storm arrives at 2,200 hours. Calibration window opens at 2,330 and closes at 2,350. You'll be inserted by specialized transport to the observation point at 2,000, giving you time to set up and acclimate before the window opens. The preparation was meticulous. Maya selected specialized Arctic ammunition designed to maintain ballistic integrity in extreme cold, modified her rifle for the specific conditions, and studied every available detail about the target environment. The adjustments required for a shot in these conditions went beyond standard sniper calculations, incorporating factors most operators never had to consider. At 1930, she boarded a specialized snow vehicle that would take her to within a mile of the observation point. The final approach would be on foot to avoid detection. The storm was already beginning as they departed, the wind picking up and temperature dropping precipitously with each passing minute. Last chance to reconsider, said the driver, a grizzled operator who had clearly been briefed on the mission. Parameters. That storm's going to be biblical. Most people can't function at all in those conditions, let alone make a precision shot at nearly 2 miles. And not most people, Maya replied, checking her equipment one final time. The driver studied her for a moment, then nodded. No, I don't suppose you are. The approach to the observation point was a masterclass in Arctic survival techniques. Where others would have fought against the conditions, Maya adapted to them, using the wind patterns to minimize energy expenditure, employing specialized movement techniques that preserved body heat. By the time she reached the designated position, a natural formation of ice that provided both concealment and a stable shooting platform, the storm had intensified to near whiteout conditions. Maya set up her equipment with the same methodical precision that characterized everything she did. Each component was carefully protected from the elements, each adjustment made with gloved hands that maintained perfect dexterity despite the biting cold. The specialized scope, designed for extreme conditions, provided a clear view of the Russian vessel despite the deteriorating weather. As predicted, at 2330 precisely, activity began on the vessel's deck. Even through the storm, Maya could make out figures in cold weather gear, bringing equipment topside. Among them was a man who matched Dr. Kharkov's profile, directing the operation with the authority of someone accustomed to leadership. The conditions were beyond extreme. The wind shifted direction every few seconds, gusting up to 65 miles per hour. The temperature had dropped to 53 below zero, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in less than a minute. Ice crystals filled the air, creating optical distortions that would render standard targeting systems useless. Maya made continuous micro-adjustments, factoring in variables that changed moment by moment. Her breathing slowed to a preternatural rhythm, her heart rate dropping to levels that would concern medical professionals. The approach to the firing position began at midnight, utilizing stealth technology to avoid detection by the compound surveillance systems. Maya moved through the difficult terrain with the same efficient economy that had served her in the Arctic, conserving energy while maintaining perfect situational awareness. By 0300, she was in position on the ridge, setting up her specialized equipment with methodical precision. The narrow gap in the terrain that provided the only possible angle to the compound was barely 18 inches wide, a sliver of opportunity that required perfect positioning. The FBI spotter assigned to assist her, Agent Donovan, watched with professional interest as Maya made adjustments no standard sniper would have considered. "You're accounting for thermal currents in three-dimensional space," he observed, studying her calculations. "I've never seen anyone plot a trajectory like that." Maya continued her work without responding. The shot would need to travel through 5 distinct thermal zones, each affecting the bullet's path differently. Standard ballistic calculations were useless here. This required an understanding of fluid dynamics and atmospheric physics beyond typical military training. "Target confirmed, moving into potential acquisition zone," came the update through. "There's secure communications. HVF has begun morning inspection routine. Window opens in approximately 12 minutes. Maya made final adjustments to her scope, programming in the complex series of calculations that would guide her aim. The specialized rifle, a custom design unlike anything in standard military inventory, had been calibrated to her exact specifications, compensating for her smaller frame while maximizing accuracy. As the minutes ticked down, Donovan found himself increasingly impressed by Maya's absolute focus. There was no nervousness, no second-guessing, no wasted movement, just the calm efficiency of someone who had done this many times before under far worse conditions. 4 minutes to window, came the update. Havoc moving toward eastern courtyard. Maya settled into her final position, her breathing slowing to the controlled rhythm that allowed for maximum stability. Her heartbeat, already naturally slower than average, dropped further as she entered the mental state that separated world-class snipers from merely excellent ones. 2 minutes. Havoc approaching predetermined point. The world narrowed to a single focus, the mission, the mathematics, the moment when all variables would align to create the impossible shot. 1 minute, confirming Havoc's identity, positive visual. Maya's finger rested lightly on the trigger, applying precisely calculated pressure that would translate intention into action at the exact moment required. Window opening now. Havoc in position. Through her specialized scope, Maya could see the target, a tall, muscular man with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. He stood in what he believed was a completely secure position. protected by terrain and security systems designed specifically to prevent the very thing Maya was about to accomplish. For a brief moment, all variables aligned: wind speeds, thermal currents, the target's position, the Earth's rotation, even the microscopic vibrations of the mountain beneath her. Maya exhaled half a breath and completed the trigger pull with perfect precision. The specialized round began its extraordinary journey, traveling through the narrow gap in the terrain, riding thermal currents that altered its trajectory in ways that defied conventional ballistics, curving around obstacles through a path that existed only in Maya's calculations. 6 seconds later, the former Delta operator, known as Havoc, collapsed in the courtyard of his compound, a single precision shot having found the one path through his supposedly impenetrable defenses. "Target down," Maya reported calmly, already beginning to disassemble her equipment. "Mission complete." Donovan stared at her in stunned silence before keying his communication device. "Confirmed. Target neutralized. Shot successful." He paused, then added, "I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself." The FBI tactical teams moved in while Maya and Donovan extracted from their position, utilizing the confusion, following Havoc's elimination to breach the compound's defenses. By the time they reached the extraction point, reports confirmed that all terrorists had been captured or neutralized, and the planned attack had been prevented. Director Winters was waiting at the debriefing location, his expression a mixture of disbelief and professional respect. "The trajectory analysis team says that shot should have been physically impossible," he said without preamble. "They're still trying to figure out how you calculated a path through those thermal currents." Maya began her standard mission report, detailed and precise without revealing any classified aspects of her training or capabilities. "I've been in law enforcement for 22 years, Winters interrupted. "Worked with some of the best snipers in the world. Never seen anything remotely like what you just did." He hesitated. "Who are you really, Specialist Chun?" "Just someone doing their job, sir," Maya replied, the same answer she had given countless times to similar questions. Winters studied her for a long moment. "Well, your job just saved thousands of lives. For what it's worth, thank you." Maya nodded once, accepting the gratitude without comment. In her world, successful missions didn't require acknowledgement. They simply meant the opportunity to continue serving in the shadows. As she prepared to board the transport that would take her back to Fort Benning, Colonel Westfield arrived for a final briefing. "The official report will show that the terrorist leader was eliminated during a standard FBI tactical operation," Westfield explained. "Your involvement won't appear in any documentation." "Understood," Maya replied, having expected nothing different. Westfield hesitated, then added, "The analysis team is still trying to understand how you made that shot. They've run simulations through the most advanced ballistic computers available and can't replicate your calculations." "Some things can't be programmed," Maya said simply. The colonel nodded, a rare smile briefly crossing her face. "Indeed. Safe travels, Whisper. I suspect we'll need your unique abilities again soon." 4 days later, Maya Chen was back at Fort Benning, resuming her role as the underestimated specialist with the small frame and the perfect aim. Her Arctic deployment was noted in her file as completed successfully, with no mention of the Russian operation or the Colorado mission. To all appearances, she was simply another soldier returning from a training assignment. On her first day back at the firing range, she overheard 2 new lieutenants discussing the recent news about the terrorist takedown in Colorado. "Can you believe that shot?" one said to the other. "The leaked reports say it curved around terrain. Features, some people are calling it the impossible shot." "Probably exaggerated," his companion replied. "You know how these stories get blown out of proportion. No human could calculate a trajectory like that." Maya continued setting up her standard issue rifle, her movements precise and economical as always. The weapon felt almost primitive compared. to the specialized equipment she had used in Colorado, but she approached it with the same focused attention she brought to everything. "Chun, good to have you back," called Sergeant Jackson, approaching her position. "How was the Arctic? Freeze anything important off?" "Educational, Sergeant," she replied, completing her equipment check. "Well, the new batch of recruits could use some pointers on basic marksmanship. Captain Harlow wants you to run them through drills this afternoon." Jackson glanced at her slender wrists. "Just keep it to standard techniques. Nothing too advanced for those little hands." Maya nodded, accepting the assignment without comment. The irony might have been bitter for someone else, being restricted to teaching basics when she had just completed what analysts were calling the shot of the century. But Maya had long ago accepted that her greatest contributions would never be acknowledged, her most extraordinary achievements buried under classified protocols and need-to-know restrictions. The new recruits arrived at the range an hour later, young, confident, predominantly male, with the same dismissive attitude toward the small female instructor that Maya had encountered throughout her career. "This is Specialist Chun," Jackson introduced her. "She'll be running your marksmanship drills today. Pay attention. Despite appearances, she actually knows what she's doing." The recruits exchanged glances, one of them poorly hiding a smirk. Maya recognized the look immediately, the automatic underestimation, the assumption of weakness, the dismissal of her capabilities based solely on her physical appearance. "We'll start with basic positioning," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the authority of absolute competence. "Marksmanship isn't about strength, it's about control." As she demonstrated the proper stance, she noticed one recruit whispering to another, both glancing at her arms and suppressing laughter. The story was so familiar it had become almost comforting in its predictability, the joke, the dismissal, the inevitable realization when her skills became impossible to ignore. "Something to share with the group, Private?" she asked, her tone neutral. The distance was 1,743 meters, across a valley with unpredictable wind patterns. The target was visible only through specialized glass designed to contain biohazards, moving in irregular patterns specifically intended to prevent targeting. The firing platform was barely wide enough for a human to stand on, much less maintain the perfect stability required for such a shot. Maya settled into the absolute focus that had defined her career. Her breathing slowed to an almost imperceptible rhythm, her heart rate dropping to levels that would concern medical professionals. The world narrowed to a single point of concentration: the mission, the mathematics, the moment when all variables would align. Through her scope, she tracked Reeves as he moved through the laboratory, noting the subtle patterns in his movement that betrayed his next likely position. The wind shifted across the valley, creating complex currents that would affect the bullet's trajectory in ways no standard calculation could predict. At precisely 0259-42, all variables aligned in a moment of perfect convergence. Maya exhaled half a breath and completed the trigger pull with flawless precision. The specialized round began its journey across the valley, riding wind currents that would have sent a conventional bullet far off course, maintaining its trajectory through a combination of advanced engineering and perfect launch parameters. 9 seconds later, Simon Reeves collapsed in the laboratory, a single precision shot having found the one path through his supposedly impenetrable defenses. The hostages froze in shock, the guards momentarily confused by the sudden fall of their leader with no audible gunshot. "Target down," Maya reported through her secure communication device, already beginning to disassemble her equipment. "Clean elimination. No collateral damage." The extraction plan activated immediately. Special Forces teams that had been positioned just outside the operational zone moved in, utilizing the confusion following Reeves's elimination to neutralize the remaining terrorists and secure the viral samples before they could be released. By the time the first extraction helicopter reached the research facility, Maya was already descending the cliff face, leaving no trace of her presence. By the time international news began reporting a successful hostage rescue by multinational forces, she was 50 miles away, moving through the jungle with the same silent efficiency that had brought her in. The official report would mention nothing about a precision shot from an impossible position, nothing about a sniper who had done what specialized teams had deemed beyond human capability. As far as the world was concerned, Simon Reeves had been eliminated during a standard tactical operation, another footnote in the endless struggle against terrorism. 3 days later, Maya Chen was back at Fort Benning, resuming her role as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Her file showed only a brief notation about specialized training exercises during her absence, with no mention of Myanmar hostages or viruses that could have killed millions. The following week brought the annual marksmanship competition, a tradition that Maya had participated in dutifully each year, consistently placing in the upper percentiles without ever taking the top position. To do so would have drawn unwanted attention, created questions about how someone with her limitations could outshoot operators with far more conventional qualifications. This year, however, something had changed. As Maya prepared her standard-issue rifle, she noticed Captain Harlow watching her with an expression she couldn't immediately identify. "Chun," he called, approaching her position. "A moment of your time." She followed him to a quiet corner of the range, away from the other participants. "I received an interesting call yesterday," Harlow began, studying her with new eyes. "From Colonel Westfield. She suggested I review your file." Maya maintained her neutral expression, waiting for the point. "Specifically, she suggested I review the parts that aren't in your file," Harlow continued. "The parts that apparently require clearance levels I didn't know existed." Understanding dawned. Westfield had made an unprecedented move, providing a partial briefing to Maya's direct commander about her true capabilities and contributions. "I've been commanding this unit for 8 years, Harlow said, his voice quiet but intense. "Thought I knew every operator under my authority. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their potential." He shook his head slowly. "Turns out I didn't know the first thing about you, Specialist Chun." Maya remained silent, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "3 years ago, I denied your application for advanced tactical training," Harlow continued. "Told you it was for your own good, that your physical limitations would make it impossible for you to complete the course." He met her gaze directly. "I was wrong." The admission hung in the air between them, simple, direct, profound in its implications. "Westfield couldn't tell me details," Harlow added. "But she made it clear that you've completed missions that would be deemed impossible by our best operators. That lives have been saved because of shots you've made when no one else could." Maya shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Her entire career had been built on anonymity, on being underestimated and overlooked. Recognition, even in this limited form, felt like a potential vulnerability. "Why are you telling me this, sir?" she asked finally. "Because I owe you an apology," Harlow replied simply. "And because things are going to change around here." The marksmanship competition began an hour later. Maya took her position on the firing line, aware of Harlow watching from behind the observation area. The familiar whispers circulated among the other participants, comments about her size, jokes about her grip strength, the usual underestimation that had shadowed her throughout her career. The first round was standard target shooting at 300 meters, a warm-up by military sniper standards. Maya performed at her usual level, placing 5th among 20 participants. Good enough to qualify for the next round, not good enough to draw undue attention. As the second round began, with targets at 600 meters under moderate wind conditions, she felt Harlow's eyes on her. Something in his expression seemed to be asking a question, or perhaps issuing a challenge. Maya hesitated, momentarily uncertain. Her entire operational security was built around being good but not exceptional, skilled but not remarkable. To show her true capabilities would violate years of careful obscurity. Yet something had shifted. Westfield's unprecedented decision to brief Harlow, however partially, suggested a changing calculus in the Shadow program's operational parameters. Perhaps there was value now in establishing a more authentic record, in creating a foundation for future missions that wouldn't require quite so much deception. Making her decision, Maya adjusted her stance slightly, allowing her body to settle into its true rhythm rather than the artificially restricted one she typically used in these competitions. Her breathing synchronized with her heartbeat in the precise pattern that enabled her most extraordinary shots. Her focus narrowed to the absolute point of concentration that allowed her to do what others deemed impossible. When she fired, the shots formed a perfect 5-point pattern in the center of the target, a grouping so tight that the range officer had to verify it wasn't a single hole. The other competitors fell silent, staring first at the target and then at the small woman whose performance had suddenly shattered their expectations. Malfunction with the target system? One of them suggested, unable to believe what he was seeing. No malfunction, the range officer confirmed. Perfect score with ideal grouping. The final round pushed the limits of the range's capabilities. Targets at 1,000 meters with artificial wind generation creating complex cross-currents. This was where the true specialists separated themselves from merely excellent marksmen, where physical limitations should have made Maya's performance decline significantly. Instead, she performed at a level that left the other competitors and observers in stunned silence. Every shot found not just the target, but the exact center, creating a grouping that the range computers initially registered as a system error because such precision was deemed statistically improbable. When the final scores were tallied, Maya Chen had not only won the competition, but had set a new base record by a margin that seemed almost impossible. The whispers had transformed from dismissive jokes to confused speculation about who this woman really was and how someone with her physical profile could accomplish what they had just witnessed. Captain Harlow approached as Maya packed her equipment, his expression a complex mixture of respect, regret, and something that might have been awe. "That was your real capability," he said quietly. "What you've been hiding all these years." Maya nodded once, acknowledging the truth. "How many other things have I been wrong about?" Harlow asked, the question seemingly directed more at himself than at her. "It's not about being wrong, sir," Maya replied, her voice carrying a rare note of genuine expression. "It's about assumptions. We all make them based on what we think we know." Harlow nodded slowly. "Well, your assumptions about me were probably accurate. I've been limiting you based on what I thought I saw." He straightened, making a visible decision. "That ends today." The changes came quickly after that. Maya's official duties were realigned to match more closely with her actual capabilities, though still carefully structured to maintain the necessary cover for her shadow operations. The jokes about her grip strength faded, replaced by a new respect that spread throughout the unit as her competition performance became part of base legend. 2 months later, Maya was called to a special briefing with Colonel Westfield and several high-ranking officials she had never met before. The atmosphere was unusually tense, with security protocols exceeding even the stringent measures typically applied to her missions. "We have a situation developing that goes beyond our standard operational parameters," Westfield began once the room was secured. "A threat that requires capabilities beyond what conventional forces can provide." The briefing outlined a scenario that made Maya's previous missions seem almost routine by comparison. A former intelligence operative had gone rogue, establishing a network of cells prepared to execute synchronized attacks across multiple countries. Conventional intelligence had failed to identify the central coordination mechanism, leaving counter-terrorism agencies struggling to respond to a threat they couldn't fully map. Traditional approaches have reached their limits, concluded General Morrison, the highest-ranking officer present. We need something different. He turned to Maya. We need Whisper, but not just for a single shot. We need you to train others. The request was unprecedented. Maya's unique capabilities had always been treated as an operational anomaly, something to be utilized in specific circumstances, but never replicated or systematized. The idea of training others in her methodologies represented a fundamental shift in strategic thinking. What you've accomplished has been treated as impossible by conventional standards, Westfield explained. But perhaps that's because we've been defining possible too narrowly. Maybe there are others who could learn what you know, who could develop capabilities beyond standard limitations if given the right guidance. Maya considered the implications carefully. Throughout her career, she had operated alone, been defined by her uniqueness, her ability to do what others couldn't. The prospect of sharing those methods, of creating a program that might develop others with similar capabilities, was both compelling and concerning. The candidates would be carefully selected, Morrison added, sensing her hesitation. Individuals who, like you, might have been overlooked because they don't fit conventional parameters. People with extraordinary potential that our traditional systems haven't recognized. The proposal took shape over the following hours. A specialized training unit, operating outside standard military structures, developing unconventional capabilities in carefully selected operators. Maya would design the methodology, establish the training protocols, create a framework for identifying and nurturing the unique combinations of skills that had made her own impossible shots possible. You wouldn't be just a trainer, Westfield emphasized. You'd still be our primary asset for the most critical operations. But you'd also be creating something lasting, a legacy that could save countless lives long after any individual mission. As the briefing concluded, General Morrison approached Maya privately. I've reviewed the files on your operations, he said, his voice carrying a note of genuine respect. What you've accomplished, it goes beyond exceptional. It redefines what we thought was humanly possible. Maya nodded acknowledgement, still uncomfortable with direct recognition of her achievements. But here's what I find most remarkable, Morrison continued. You've done all of this while being consistently underestimated, frequently dismissed, and repeatedly told what you couldn't do. He shook his head slowly. Lesser operators would have been broken by that. You turned it into an advantage. It was never about proving anything, Maya replied, finding it important that he understand this fundamental truth. It was about the mission, about what needed to be done. Morrison studied her for a long moment. And that, Specialist Chun, is precisely why you're the right person to lead this program. Because you understand that true excellence isn't about recognition or validation, it's about purpose. The training facility was established in a remote location, deliberately separated from conventional military structures. The first class of candidates arrived 3 months later, 12 individuals, selected through a process Maya had personally designed. They came from various branches of the military and intelligence services, each having demonstrated potential that didn't fit standard assessment metrics. Among them was Private First Class Sarah Rodriguez, who had been repeatedly passed over for sniper school despite exceptional scores, because her small stature was deemed unsuitable for field operations. There was Lieutenant James Park, whose innovative targeting calculations had been dismissed as theoretically interesting but practically unfeasible by conventional instructors. And Specialist David Talbot, a mechanical savant whose unique rifle modifications had been rejected by traditional armory protocols. They were, in essence, reflections of Maya herself, individuals whose greatest strengths had been overlooked because they didn't conform to established expectations of what excellence should look like. On the first day of training, Maya stood before them, still uncomfortable in the role of instructor, but committed to the mission these 12 represented. For the first time in her career, she was being asked not just to perform the impossible, but to teach others how to do the same. You're here because someone recognized potential in you that others missed. She began, her voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. Potential that doesn't fit conventional parameters or follow standard development paths. She moved to a table where 12 identical rifles had been placed. Standard issue weapons with no visible modifications or specialized features. The first lesson is simple but fundamental, she continued. Extraordinary capability doesn't come from exceptional equipment. It comes from understanding what truly matters and eliminating everything else. One by one, she invited each candidate to fire at a standard target, observing their techniques with careful attention. Each demonstrated above-average skill, but also revealed the limitations imposed by conventional training, the emphasis on physical strength over precision, on established protocols over innovation. Now watch, Maya instructed, picking up one of the standard rifles. Without any visible adjustments, she fired a series of shots that grouped with impossible precision at the center of the target. Same weapon, different understanding. The candidates exchanged glances, expressions shifting from confusion to fascination. Over the coming months, you'll unlearn as much as you learn, Maya explained. You'll discover that many of the limitations you've accepted as facts are actually just assumptions. You'll develop capabilities that others will call impossible, not because you're superhuman, but because you understand what truly matters in ways they don't. As the training progressed, Maya watched these overlooked individuals begin to transform, not just in their technical skills, but in their fundamental understanding of what they were capable of. Rodriguez, once dismissed for her small frame, developed precision that rivaled Maya's own. Park's theoretical calculations evolved into practical methodologies that redefined ballistic possibilities. Talbot's mechanical innovations created equipment, adaptations that enabled all of them to exceed conventional limitations. 6 months into the program, Colonel Westfield arrived for an assessment. The demonstration she witnessed left even her, who had seen Maya's impossible shots firsthand, visibly impressed. "You've created something remarkable here," Westfield said afterward. "Not just exceptional operators, but a completely new paradigm for what's possible." Maya nodded, acknowledging the progress while maintaining her characteristic reserve. "They still have much to learn." "As do we all," Westfield replied thoughtfully. "Perhaps the most important lesson is the one you've been teaching by example all along, that true capability isn't defined by how you look or what others believe. Possible, it's defined by what you actually accomplish." The first deployment of Maya's trainees came sooner than expected. A crisis situation developed that required multiple precision operations across different locations simultaneously, something that would have been impossible for even Maya to handle alone. As she briefed her team on the mission parameters, Maya recognized the magnitude of what they had created together. These individuals, once overlooked and underestimated, had developed capabilities that would save countless lives. Their extraordinary skills, like hers, would never receive public recognition or acclaim. Their greatest achievements would remain classified, their most remarkable contributions known only to a handful with appropriate clearance. And that, Maya realized, was perhaps the most profound lesson she had imparted, that true excellence doesn't require acknowledgement. Real strength doesn't need validation. In a world obsessed with recognition, there is a special power in remaining unseen, in accomplishing the impossible without anyone knowing your name. As the team dispersed to their assignments, Maya felt a quiet satisfaction unlike anything she had experienced before. Her legacy wouldn't be recorded in medals or commendations, wouldn't be celebrated in military histories or public memorials. It would live in the impossible shots taken by people who had once been told what they couldn't do, in lives saved by those who had transformed limitation into advantage, in a new understanding of human potential that transcended conventional parameters. And for Maya Chen, the specialist with the supposedly weak grip who had changed the course of history multiple times without recognition, that was more than enough. It was everything. If you've been inspired by this story, hit the subscribe button to join our Everyday Hero Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know what everyday heroes you'd like to hear about next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.